Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome if you're new. I hope you're all doing well. These are all the books I read in September. Let's talk about them. We are here with my September wrap up, as always at the end of the month, a little bit late just because of video scheduling and the way things have fallen, but I'm here nevertheless to talk about the books I read in September. I had a very iffy reading month, and I think because of that I have now hit a slump. I haven't finished a single book in October, and you're seeing this on the 8th of October and I haven't read a single one yet. It could change by the time that you see this video in the 2 days between me filming on the 6th and you seeing this on the 8th. It could have changed, but I highly doubt I would have finished a book in the next 2 days because I have kind of hit a mini slump, which is sad. And I do think the main cause of that is because of all the low ratings that I rated books in September. So although in terms of reading in September, it equals top spot with April of being my highest rated quantity-wise of reading. I read a total of 9 books. The quality, once again, like April actually, it's the weakest in terms of stats and ratings, which is so interesting. Like, it's better to take my time and read books for longer and enjoy them and rate them higher than read books quicker and just not really enjoy them. However, I think the reason I read so much in the month of September is because during 1 week of the month, I did a whole spinner wheel, controls how much I read per day for a week, and that massively helped me read so much. If you want to see that vlog, I'll link up above and down below, but I read so much during that week. I finished 4 books. So without that vlog and that little experiment, I would not have read as much as possible. But with that being said, let's hop into my stats. So like I said, I read a total of 9 books in the month of September, spanning across 3,119 pages. There were 2 2-stars, 5 3-stars, and only 1 5-star. No 4 stars. And then 1 I didn't rate because it was a non-fiction. 7 were physical, 1 was an audiobook and 1 was an ebook. 6 were my physical TBR, 2 were from Scribd and 1 was a reread. There were 7 contemporaries, 1 non-fiction and 1 romance, and all 9 of the books I read in September were adult. And those were my stats for September. The books that made up those stats were The 7-Day Switch by Kelly Yarm, Nearly All Men in Lagos Are Mad by Damlier Kuku, 7 Days of June by Tia Williams, Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood, Big Summer by Jennifer Weiner, The How and the Why by Cynthia Hand, Period Power by Nadia Okamoto, I Heart Christmas by Lindsay Kelk, and Pictures of Lily by Paige Toon. The first book I read in the month of September was The 7-Year Switch by Kelly Yarm. This was a book gifted to me by one of my friends off of BookTube. I want to say 2 Christmases ago now, and I finally got around to reading it, and I did enjoy this book. I gave this one 3 stars, like I did with most of the books this month. All of them were good, just nothing kind of outstanding or kind of books that really stood in my brain most of the month this month. They were just kind of books I read, finished, and never thought about again. If you didn't know, this book basically follows our 2 main characters, and it's kind of like a Freaky Friday situation. They switch bodies, and one is a mother that does it all. She is go, go, go. She sends her kids off to all these different after school clubs. She helps other mothers out who can't really look after their kids very well. She always does loads of carpooling, and she's just really on it. And she's a stay-at-home mum, and she does organic meals, and she just really focuses around the house and cleaning and making sure her kids are a-okay all of the time, and making sure that their diet's all good and that they're all ready and good to go each day. And then there's another mum who is a corporate mother, and she's very much in the interest of climbing the corporate ladder. She has her own company. She's the CEO of this productivity company, and they both hate each other at the beginning because they both think each other are mothering incorrectly, and then they end up switching bodies, Freaky Friday situation, and come to realise that no matter how you mother, you're doing a good job and you're doing the best you can with your given situation. So I really enjoyed the moral of the story with this one. And yeah, other than that, because it was 3 stars, I don't have much more to say to it. The writing was easy, the characters were likeable, and like I said, I really, really enjoyed the message. So this was a fun one, definitely one I'll be keeping because it means a lot to me, because it was gifted to me by a BookTube friend. But yeah, overall, a good book, but nothing spectacular. Whilst I was reading that one, I listened to an audiobook of Period Power by Nadia Okamoto, and I actually, hands up, thought this was a completely different book, because there's another book called Period Power by Maisie Hill, and that was the one I thought I was reading, but I wasn't. I was reading this one, and this one was good too, but it's very much more focused on the younger audience. People that are starting out getting their periods, not really knowing what to expect, not really knowing how to deal with it, or what products to use. And it's just an informational booklet that helps people understand the menstrual cycle and how to deal with your periods, and what collection methods to use. And it does touch upon some history of periods and period products and how they came to be, and like the history behind that, and then also kind of like period poverty and kind of how we as people in society really need to allow period products to be more open to and more available to everyone, because everyone needs them. They're not a luxury, they're an essential. And it really speaks upon like people who have periods in prison and kind of how they're so limited to what they have access to. And it's just, it was an eye-opening kind of manifesto on periods, and I really enjoyed some aspects of it, but at the end it did sound a little preachy, and I wasn't really vibing with the audiobook by the end. But I definitely took away a lot of information that I wasn't aware of, especially regarding period poverty and periods in prison as well. So I learned a lot, but it wasn't like, one, it wasn't the book I was expecting, which I'm still interested to read, but it was informational, and I did kind of gain a little bit from it, so I don't feel bad for having read it. Like, it wasn't a waste of time. But I didn't rate this book because it was a non-fiction. So yeah, that was that book I read. The next physical book I read was Nearly All Men in Lagos Are Mad by, I always butcher his name, Demalia Cuckoo. This was a book I picked up in my birthday bookish bingo extravaganza, and this was a book for the prompt book to pick up a book I've never heard of before, and I had never heard of this. This is a short story collection, which is also very much outside my typical comfort zone. I don't tend to read short stories. I don't feel I ever get enough out of them. I'm either disappointed with the lack of story or I'm always wanting more. So this one was a difficult one to rate because I liked the writing style, and if this author ever released a full novel, I'd definitely be interested in reading it because I did really enjoy her writing style. This was a debut book by them, by the way, and I did enjoy some of the short stories, so much so that I wanted some to continue on. However, do I remember which of my favourite ones were? No. Which is the tricky situation. This book basically follows a whole cast of characters, 12 short stories about love in Lagos, from women who kind of hide their husband's adultery accusations because they're in the church and they don't want to be looked upon badly, and people who accidentally fall in love who aren't meant to, and people who just kind of like have one night stands, and people who've been together forever. A whole cast of different love stories in this, whether they're good ones or bad ones, and it was a really interesting read. But once again, nothing I can really take out of this book and kind of continue on my life thinking, oh, that was a good book. It was just like a one and done situation. So once again, I gave this book 3 stars. I was then hoping for something spectacular with Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood, and once again, this book was a disappointment. If you haven't been following my channel for ages and you are new, then hi, welcome, thanks for joining. But you may not know that one of my favourite books of all time is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood, so I was expecting high hopes from the rest of her books. However, this one just felt really flat to me, especially comparing it to The Love Hypothesis, and you can't not compare it to The Love Hypothesis. It's the same situation, it's the same kind of setting, academia, people, rivals, falling in love around science, so it's really hard not to compare the two because they are so similar. And I had to compare it to Love Hypothesis, and this one just didn't really compare at all. This one basically follows our main character B, who is a massive fan of Marie Curie. So she has an anonymous Twitter account where every time a scientist will message her, it'll be like, what will Marie Curie do? And she will come back with responses in light of Marie Curie and being like, this is what Marie Curie would do. And she helps kind of people solve issues, a bit like an agony aunt situation, but regarding science and being women in STEM. And this platform is completely anonymous. And when she gets an opportunity to work for NASA on creating like a new helmet for space, she gets really excited by the opportunity. However, in contrary to that, she has to work with her arch enemy, who she worked with in undergrad school, I believe, because now she's in grad school. It's all very confusing. I don't truly understand the platforms and the levels in like graduate schemes and higher education, if you get my drift. So then she thinks that everyone's out to get her because she's working with her arch nemesis, and then obviously it's being a romance ensues from there. And it just felt really flat. Like, I actually guessed the plot point and the kind of big reveal like 30 pages into it. I remember reading this book on the sofa with Mark while he was playing his game, and I was like, if that's the plot twist, then I figured it out already, and it was the plot twist. I think having read this book, I truly have come to realise that I don't like enemies to lovers as a romance book trope. In fantasy, it works well. In romance, I just don't like the angst. It really drives me insane, which is why this book took me so long to get through in the first place, because I just wasn't really vibing with the whole situation of the 2 main characters. And yes, of course, they started to kind of like each other and a romance kind of ensued. And from that point, I enjoyed the book. Like, I loved the steamy scenes, just like I liked in The Love Hypothesis, but For me, because enemies to lovers, I just didn't really vibe with the entire book, and because I guessed the plot point 30 pages into this book, the ending was just so far-fetched and it just wasn't a book for me. I gave it a 3 stars and I think that's a push. This will definitely be going in the unhaul pile. The next one I read was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This was a gift to me from Chloe, and once again, 3 stars. It was a fine book. I really thought I was going to rate this book more because halfway through I really thought I was going to give it a 4 star, but I think it just then dragged on too long, which is weird because it's not that big of a book. It's actually quite short. This book basically follows 2 main characters, Shane and Eva, and they spent one summer together when they were in high school, when they were like 18 years old, and they spent a really intense week together, and they started kind of getting feelings for each other, and then something kind of dramatic happens and you don't know why as a reader, that they kind of spent the next 15 years apart and haven't had any communication, and then they stumble upon each other in the present timeline and they start to fall for each other again, and it's a second chance romance. And I did enjoy the second chance romance aspect, and what I really enjoyed, definitely having come from a really kind of angsty, miscommunication centered book, I really enjoyed this because it was much more of a mature romance. Having had the 2 main characters being a lot older and a lot more mature, they had better conversations, they were a lot more direct with each other, they really just kind of like spoke their mind and dealt with their issues together rather than kind of like dealing with them apart and then not talking to each other and then having loads of miscommunication. That wasn't the case, and that's what I really enjoyed about this book. But it's not something that is resonating with me. And do I remember much of the book? No, which is so sad. I know it's like the 8th of October, but I only read this book like a month ago. Why do I not really remember much about it? I don't know. This September was a great month for the amount of books I read, but not so much for the quality, and that makes me so sad. I did get a lot of books on my physical TBR, which I'm happy about, but I'm sad that I didn't like them all. I did love how in-depth you got to know the characters, and I loved the fact that Ava had a little girl who was so sassy and really kind of elevated the book to a new level in terms of like comedic value. The writing was easy to read for sure, ever so slightly a little bit faffy in places, and retold some of the things that you didn't really need retelling about it, if you get what I mean. Like it was a little bit overwritten, basically, is what I'm trying to say. But overall, I enjoyed the romance. There was no miscommunication. It felt raw, it felt real, it felt realistic, and yeah, I enjoyed it, but nothing special, unfortunately. 3 stars. The next book I did finish on a happier note was The How and the Why by Cynthia Hand, a YA book. Talking of which, my stats are incorrect. It's 8 adult and 1 YA. I completely forgot this was YA because it was so good. This was my one and only 5 star of the month, and oh boy was it a worthy 5 star. It was such a relief after reading so many just average books to get a 5 star, and one that I just was not expecting. I love this book. This book basically follows our main character, Cass, who was adopted when she was a little baby, and she's finally 18. The first chapter opens up with her 18th birthday party, and she's finally 18, and it starts to kind of get her cogs in motion of wanting to find out who her birth mother was, because it was a closed adoption, so she's never really known her birth mother. What I love most about this book is the fact that you get Cass's perspective in chapters, and throughout every other chapter or so you would get a letter written by the birth mother, because her birth mother was on a young pregnancy kind of program where they were allowed to write letters to their unborn child, and you're only meant to really write 1, but Cass's mum ends up writing like 15, and you get them throughout the book, and it really just elevated the book because you got to know Cass before she was born. You got to know Cass's birth mother and how Cass became to be, because you got to know the birth mother's kind of like relationships and sexual relationships, and it was just like, it was definitely more of a mature YA, which is probably why I enjoyed it so much, and the fact that it was like purely a contemporary. There was no kind of romance to this book whatsoever, and it definitely did draw away from the overall plot, which was very family central and heavy in the family aspects, which is what made this book what it is, because Cass is trying to navigate learning her past, and she needed her family to support her in that big decision and that big journey that she was going to go through. And it was just like the perfectly told story in my personal opinion, especially for a YA. The safe sex conversations that was in this, the way that Cass was like learning about herself, and she was just so mature about it. It was just, yeah, chef's kiss, perfect. The next book I read and finished in the month of September was Big Summer by Jeff Weiner. This book was one of the lowest rated books of the month for me. This was a 2.5 star. Maybe even a 2. I don't know, it just wasn't that great, and unfortunately it was a gift from Chloe, which I will be unhauling sadly, but this book just wasn't for me. I thought this was a contemporary. I was going in the mindset of it being a contemporary, and it was a contemporary for the first like 300 pages, which is great. for a contemporary lover like me. This book basically follows our main character, I've forgotten her name, Daphne, and her ex-best friend Drew. And you kind of get a story of how Daphne and Drew came to be best friends. They were kind of forced together in school, as you are with most of your friends in school. And Daphne has become this really successful plus-sized fashion influencer, and Drew has kind of become this very isolated person. She was much of a bully in school, and especially to Daphne, so that's why they kind of drifted apart. And then Drew comes back into Daphne's life after having years of no communication. She forces Daphne to become her maid of honor because Drew has no friends because she was a bully in school and she hasn't really kind of made many connections as an adult. So Daphne kind of feels obliged to be Drew's maid of honor, and that's kind of where that's the only kind of thing I can say about the story, because after that, this book becomes a mystery thriller. Yeah, I know, I'm as shocked as you. I was not expecting it. I went on to Goodreads because I was so shook, and it is categorized as a mystery. Was it a good mystery? No. Did I care about it? No. Was I just so thrown that I just didn't care anymore? Yeah. It just wasn't a good book. I just don't think it was written well. It was so jarring to go from a contemporary book about a plus-sized fashion influencer to a murder mystery. It was just so bizarre, and it was so jarring, and I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that I started by reading a contemporary, and by the end I was trying to figure out who'd killed a wedding guest. It was just very strange. Very strange. Yeah, 2.5 stars will be unhauling. I then reread I Heart Christmas by Lindsay Kelk. I should probably get it down. I read this bad boy and tabbed it all up and wrote in it like I'm doing with the rest of the series, and I cannot wait to finish off the series. But this is the 6th book in the I Heart series by Lindsay Kelk, so I can't say too much about it, but as you can kind of tell from the title, it takes place in New York at Christmas time as Angela, our main character, gets up to more Angela-type adventures. If you read the series, then you know Angela gets into a lot of mayhem during these books, and they're just fun to read, and they're cozy for me, and they're such a kind of like comfort read series for me. So I really enjoyed rereading this book. However, I originally rated this when I first listened to it on an audiobook was a 4.5 stars. Shocked, I know. And this time I rated it a 3. So yes, it's come down in rating, but in terms of relatability, a massive plus for this, because I related so much to Angela in this book. Not like any other books I've read in this series did I relate to her so much in this one. In this one, Angela and Alex go through a sick situation where Alex is really wanting kids, and Angela isn't in that stage of her life yet. She still wants to focus on her career. She doesn't think she's ready, but then when is the right time? And that is very much me and Mark right now. Mark is a lot older than I am, which is absolutely fine. Like, I do not care about age. Age is just a number, but he is older and I am younger, and I feel like I'm only in my mid-20s. Is it too young to have kids? But then I have my health to think about because I have got a chronic illness, and to have kids, it would be a lot helpful to have them a lot sooner. So then therefore the age gap doesn't really matter because like I need to have them sooner rather than later anyway. But am I ready because I'm only in my mid-20s? Like, oh my god, the amount of internal monologue that Angela had in this book that I could relate to was crazy. So therefore, like, the relatability for this one was so incredible that I loved reading Angela's struggles because I related to her so much. So yes, not the most fun book out of the series having reread it because I just didn't feel like there was much plot to it. I did really enjoy the topics that Lindsay Kelk kind of addressed in this book because I thought they were still so relatable to this day, even though this book was written in 2013, so 10 years ago this book came out now. So yeah, gave this one a 3 stars, enjoyed it. Obviously we'll be keeping because it's part of my collection and my forever collection now. But yeah, I just loved how relatable I felt in this book. So that's that one. And then the last book I read in the month of September was Pictures of Lily by Paige Toon. One of my end of year TBR books, and also a book that I wanted to get to because I'm trying to make my way through Paige Toon's backlist, and this was the next one I needed to read in publication order. However, I didn't like this one. This was the other 2-star that I rated this month. I found this book so strange. It basically follows our main character Lily, who gets shipped off to Australia when she's only 16 years old because her mother falls for a guy online who lives in Australia, so she ships her and Lily out to meet him and live with him basically. So Lily ends up getting uprooted away from her friends and family to live in Australia, and she doesn't like it at first, and then she ends up finding passion in a conservation park, and she ends up working there during the summer, and she ends up getting to know a guy called Ben who's 10 years older than her. He is 26, and although nothing happens, like absolutely clear nothing happens because she is a minor, she ends up pining for this character. She ends up getting massive feelings for him, and you can tell that he has feelings for her, but nothing happens because of the age gap, and then Ben ends up going away back to the UK anyway because he has a fiance. So it's all just icky red flags everywhere, like red flags everywhere, and then so Lily never gets to go out with Ben because she ends up just moving on with her life, and then about 100 and 150 pages in, after you've had the whole kind of like 16-year-old Lily situation, you move to her when she's 26, 10 years later, and she's being proposed to by her current boyfriend Richard, and she says yes, but she has doubts because all she can think about, even 10 years later, is this 6 weeks that she spent with Ben at a conservation park when she was 16 years old, and she's constantly pining over him. And then obviously, as contemporaries and romances tend to go, Ben re-enters her life, and then she has this very difficult decision to make. And I thought it was just very unrealistic. One, the fact that she was 16 and pining over a 26-year-old, very weird and icky. But two, the fact that she can't get over him for 10 years. I don't know, I'm sure there's situations out there that are very realistic to this, but for me it just felt so off. And I love Paige Toon's writing, which is why I was so conflicted with this book, because by the end, of course, I was rooting for Ben and Lily to get together, even though the whole beginning of their relationship was so icky. Because Paige Toon writes so well, and she's so addictive to read, and that's why I love her book so much, and it's why I'm going through her backlist to read all her books, because I just find them really addictive and easy to read. So although this book was just icky red flags everywhere for me, I managed to enjoy it to some extent by the end, which is why it got 2.5 stars, because it just, Paige Toon does wonders with romance, and for some reason you end up wanting Lily and Ben to get together by the end. And it's just one of those books that is not right in any way, but you pine for it anyway, and that is how I felt about Pictures of Lily. So those are all 9 books that I read in the month of September. All 9 books right here. I really hope for a better October, but I'm not starting off very well, having not read a single thing yet, but the day and the month is still young, so hopefully I can get some books read. Obviously it's my magical hopathon this month, so fingers crossed I can read a lot for that, because I have a very, very ambitious TBR planned for that, and the TBR will be coming next week when you're watching this, so look forward to that, and subscribe so you don't miss it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a massive thumbs up and subscribe down below to see future content from me. I do anything from monthly TBRs, monthly wrap-ups, weekly reading vlogs, any other British content that you can think of. I usually have it on this channel, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.